Welcome to the Light and Shadow podcast. I am Gray, quantum informed spiritual mentor, founder of Greyethereus Academy, and creator of the Alchemical Pattern-to-Healing Framework. I work at the threshold where insight alone stops working and real transformation begins. This is the space for the spiritually aware who are ready to go deeper than healing has taken them. There is a point at the base of your skull where your neck meets the back of your head that the ancient world considered one of the most sacred and most vulnerable points on the human body. Not the crown, not the third eye, not the heart center, all of which the modern spiritual community discusses at length. The one most people have never heard of, the one that sits quietly at the occipital ridge, at the junction of skull and spine, where the brain meets the body, where the physical and the etheric intersect in a way that has no equivalent anywhere else in human anatomy. Theosophists called it the Alta Major Center. Some esoteric traditions call it the Zeus Point. Ancient mystery schools called it the seat of divine will made incarnate, the point through which cosmic intelligence downloads into the physical nervous system. Indigenous traditions across cultures identified this point as a portal, a place of exceptional energetic sensitivity that required protection, ritual attention, and conscious awareness. And yet, in the modern world, almost no one is talking about it. Why does the back of the neck feel so vulnerable? Why do so many people instinctively want to cover it? To wear scarves, to pull up their collars, to protect that specific point from cold, from touch, from energetic exposure. Why do certain people feel immediately unsettled when someone approaches them from behind at the neck? Why do practitioners of energy work identify this point as one of the most frequent locations of energetic intrusion, blockage, and depletion? Today we are going into all of it. The ancient names and why they were chosen. The theosophical understanding of the Alta Major as a distinct energetic center beyond the traditional 7 chakras. The esoteric anatomy of this point and why it matters for your consciousness, your spiritual development, your nervous system, and your energetic protection. And why cultures across history instinctively protected this point. And what it means for you, practically, somatically, and spiritually, right now. So this is the episode about the point on your body that the ancient world knew was a gateway, and the modern world forgot to protect. Before we go into the energetics and the anatomy, let's establish the foundation, because the names this point has been given across traditions are not arbitrary. They are precise descriptions of what the ancient world understood this center to be. The Alta Major, which is the term Alta Major, comes primarily from the theosophical tradition. The late 19th and early 20th century esoteric movement founded by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, later developed by Annie Besant, Charles Leadbeater, and Alice Bailey, which synthesized Eastern and Western esoteric knowledge into what this became the foundation of much of modern metaphysical understanding. In the theosophical framework, the Alta Major is described as the minor chakra, or more precisely, an etheric center located at the base of the skull, at the occiput, where the skull meets the first cervical vertebra. But calling it minor in the theosophical sense is misleading, because its function in that system is anything but minor. The Alta Major is described in theosophical literature as the center through which the Antakarana, the rainbow bridge between the personality and the higher self, terminates in the physical body. The Antakarana in this system is the thread of consciousness that connects the incarnated self to the soul and ultimately to the spirit. It is the channel through which spiritual will, divine intelligence, and higher dimensional information descend into the physical vehicle. The Alta Major is where that channel lands. In Alice Bailey's writings, transmitted from the Tibetan master DJ Wall, Cool, and considered among the most detailed esoteric anatomy texts in the Western tradition, the Alta Major is described as coming into full activation only as the human being develops spiritually. In the average person, it is relatively dormant. In the spiritually developed individual, particularly one who has done significant work with the higher mind and the will, it becomes increasingly active, creating what Bailey describes as a triangle of energy with the crown and the ajna centers that governs the highest functions of spiritual consciousness in incarnation. Alta Major literally translates from Latin as the greater height or the higher hall, the hall through which the highest comes in, the gateway of the elevated. Even the name points to its function. This is not a center for ordinary consciousness. It is the point where the extraordinary enters the ordinary, where heaven, as it were, meets the spine. The Zeus Point, where the power, will, and divine command. The name Zeus Point comes from a different stream of esoteric understanding, one that draws on the Greek mythological and philosophical framework and its understanding of divine archetypes as energetic principles rather than literal beings. Zeus, in the Greek tradition, is not simply the king of the gods. He is a principle of divine will, the organizing intelligence of the cosmos made manifest through sovereign authority. Zeus is the force that maintains cosmic order, that directs the movements of fate, that represents the highest expression of purposive will in the universe. To name this point at the back of the skull, the Zeus Point, is to identify it as the location where divine will, not a human will, not ego-driven will, but the sovereign, purposive, organizing will of the cosmos, interfaces with the human physical structure. This is consistent with a theosophical understanding. The Alta Major as the landing point of spiritual will, the Zeus Point as the seat of divine command made physical. Two names, the same recognition. There is also a neurological dimension to this naming that the ancient world intuited before it could be scientifically confirmed, which we will explore. Because the structures that reside at the base of the skull, at the brainstem, at the junction of skull and spine, do in fact govern the most fundamental and powerful functions of the human organism. The ancient world, in naming this point after the king of the gods, was not being poetic. It was being very precise. Before theosophy formalized the terminology, the recognition of this point existed across traditions and cultures that had no direct contact with each other. In Taoist internal alchemy, the Chinese esoteric tradition of cultivating and refining life force energy, the point at the base of the skull is called the jade pillow, or Yu Zhen, one of the most significant points in the governing vessel, the primary energetic channel running up the spine. In Taoist practice, the jade pillow is described as one of three gates, along with the coccyx and the mid-back, through which Kundalini equivalent energy must pass in its ascent from the base of the spine to the crown. The jade pillow gate is considered the most difficult to open and the most significant in terms of what becomes accessible when it does open. In Vedic and Tantric traditions, the base of the skull is identified as the location of the bindu, a point of concentrated consciousness described as a drop or a seed from which the manifestation of sound and form originates. The bindu is considered the point of convergence of all the nadis, the subtle energy channels of the body, at the highest point of the physical structure. It is the dot above the crescent moon in the Sanskrit symbol for Om. In certain indigenous traditions of the Americas, particularly those with sophisticated energetic healing systems, the base of the skull is identified as a primary entry point for both positive spiritual energy and for intrusive energetic influences. Healers in these traditions pay specific attention to this point, both in protection and in the removal of energetic intrusions. The consistency across traditions that had no contact with each other is not coincidence. It is convergent recognition of something real. Now let's go into why this specific point, this junction of skull and spine at the back of the neck, carries the energetic significance that every tradition that has examined it agrees it carries. Because unlike many esoteric claims, the significance of this point can be understood from multiple converging directions simultaneously: anatomical, neurological, energetic, and consciousness-based. And when multiple frameworks independently arrive at the same conclusion about the same physical location, it is worth paying very close attention. The base of the skull, the occiput, houses the brainstem. And the brainstem is neurologically the most ancient and the most fundamental structure in the human nervous system. It contains the medulla oblongata, which governs breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, and the most basic life-sustaining functions. It contains the pons, which coordinates movement, sleep, and the relay of sensory information between the brain and the body. It contains the reticular activating system, the network that governs consciousness itself, that determines what you are aware of and what you are not, that mediates the transitions between sleep and waking, between ordinary consciousness and altered states. The base of the skull houses the biological machinery of consciousness itself. And there is more. The foramen magnum, the opening in the base of the skull through which the brainstem becomes the spinal cord, is the single physical gateway between the brain and the entire body. Every signal traveling from the brain to the body and every signal traveling from the body to the brain passes it through this opening. Every sensation, every motor command, every autonomic regulation system, signal. There is literally no other point in the human body where so much passes through, so little space. When the ancient world identified this as a gateway, as the point through which cosmic intelligence enters the physical vehicle, they were, in physical terms, not wrong. This is the gateway. The neurological architecture at this point is uniquely fundamental to everything the human organism experiences and does. The vagus nerve, which we discussed in our nervous system regulation episode, emerges from the brainstem at precisely this location. The vagus nerve is the primary nerve at the parasympathetic nervous system, connecting the brain to every major organ of the body. It governs the heart, the lungs, the digestive system, the immune system. It is the biological infrastructure of social engagement and of safety and of felt sense of being connected to life. The vagus nerve's origin at the brainstem at the base of the skull means that the Alta Major point is neurologically adjacent to the seat of everything we have identified as the regulation system of the human organism. Stimulation of this point through specific touch, through certain meditation practices, through the sound and vibration practices described in theosophical and tantric literatures, directly influences vagal tone, which means it influences the entire parasympathetic system, which means it influences nervous system regulation, immune function, emotional processing, and the capacity for spiritual experience that requires a regulated nervous system as its prerequisites. The ancient practitioners who identified this point as sacred and worked with it ritually were, in neurological terms, working with the most significant regulatory junction in the human body. In the theosophical and broader esoteric framework, the physical body is interpenetrated by and surrounded by the etheric body, the energy matrix that underlies and sustains the physical structure. The chakras are centers in the etheric body that correspond to specific points in this physical body. The Alta Major in this framework is described as an etheric center that is positioned slightly above and behind the physical skull, hovering at the posterior cranium in the etheric field. It is described as a vortex of energy that spins differently from the major chakras, more like a receiver than a transmitter. Where the major chakras both receive and radiate energy, the Alta Major is primarily receptive in function. It receives incoming energy from the higher dimensions and steps it down into the physical nervous system. This is consistent with its neurological position, the brainstem as receiver and processor of all incoming information from both the external environment and the higher structure of the brain. And it is consistent with the protection imperative we will explore next, because a center that is primarily receptive in function is inherently more vulnerable to what it receives. A receiver that cannot discriminate between signals will receive indiscriminately. And that might create problems. Now let's address the dimension of this teaching that is most immediately practical and most urgently relevant for anyone who works in energetically sensitive spaces, who has developed their spiritual sensitivity, or who has simply noticed that the back of their neck feels more vulnerable than any other part of their body. Now, why gateways are vulnerable? A gateway, by definition, allows passage in both directions. What opens to receive the high also opens to receive what is not high. What allows spiritual intelligence to descend also creates a point of access for energetic influences that are not aligned with the individual's highest well-being. This is not fear-mongering. This is energetic logic. The most significant opening in any system is also the most significant vulnerability in that system. The front door of a house is both the primary point of welcome and the primary point of security concern. Both are true simultaneously. The Alta Major, as the primary reception point for higher dimensional energy, is also the primary point of energetic vulnerability in the etheric body, particularly for individuals who are highly sensitive, who have opened their energy field through spiritual practice, or who work in environments like healing, caregiving, or high-stress professional settings, crowded urban spaces as well, where they are regularly exposed to the energetic states of many other people. Now, what energetic vulnerability at the Alta Major feels like? And this is where many people will recognize something they have experienced but never had language for. The inexplicable discomfort when someone stands directly behind you, particularly close to the neck, or to the back of the neck, of your head and neck. Not ordinary social discomfort, a specific instinctive alertness, a subtle but unmistakable sense of exposure. The vulnerability to specific environments, like crowded spaces, hospitals, or places of high emotional intensity, that seems to enter primarily through the back of the neck. People who are highly sensitive often report that they feel environmental energies coming in through this point, that they feel overwhelmed or depleted in a way that seems to begin at the base of the skull and then spreads. That specific fatigue that accumulates at the base of the skull, like a heaviness or a tension or a density at the occiput that is different in quality from ordinary muscle tension. In energy work practice, this is frequently identified as the accumulation of foreign energy at the Alta Major, which is the energy that has been received but not processed, that has entered the reception point and not been cleared. The disorientation that can accompany significant openings at this point, in deep meditation, in certain body work sessions, in moments of intense spiritual experience, when the Alta Major is activated beyond the individual's current capacity to integrate what is coming through. In Alice Bailey's work, and in the broader theosophical literature on the Alta Major, there is a consistent caution about the premature or uncontrolled activation of this center, because the Alta Major governs the descent of spiritual will into the physical vehicle, an activation that outpaces the individual's development, their ethical refinement, their emotional stability, their energetic capacity can produce experiences that range from disorienting to destabilizing. This is not unique to the Alta Major. Every major energetic opening, every chakra activation, every Kundalini movement carries the same principle. The opening must be commensurate with the individual's readiness to integrate what the opening brings. But the Alta Major carries a specific version of this caution, because what descends through it is not just energy in a general sense. It is will. It is the organizing intelligence that directs the life. And will that descends into a vehicle that is not yet sufficiently developed to wield it with integrity produces the specific distortions of ungrounded spiritual grandiosity, of misused power, of the spiritual practitioner who has accessed real capacity but lacks the wisdom structure to use it well. Protection is not just about keeping negative energy out. It is about ensuring that what comes through the Alta Major comes through at the rate and quality the individual can actually integrate. The scarf, the collar, the cover. Why people has always protected this point? The instinct to cover the back of the neck, to wrap something around it, to protect it from exposure appears across human cultures in ways that go far beyond climate or fashion. In many European folk magic and protective traditions, the back of the neck was specifically identified as a point of vulnerability to the evil eye, to energetic attack, and to the influence of ill-intentioned others. Specific amulets, specific fabrics, specific colors were worn on the neck precisely to protect this point. In certain Middle Eastern and Mediterranean traditions, cultures with a highly developed understanding of energetic protection, the neck is one of the primary sites of protective jewelry, of specific stones worn to shield the energetic field, of fabric covering that serves both cultural and protective functions simultaneously. The turtleneck, the high collar, the scarf wrapped not just around the front of the throat, but specifically up and around the back of the neck. These are ubiquitous across cultures and climates. The body knows this point is vulnerable and communicates that knowledge through the instinct to cover it. In energy healing traditions, Reiki, pranic healing, shamanic healing, the back of the neck is one of the primary treatment sites precisely because it accumulates energetic debris, because it is a common location for an energetic intrusion, and because clearing and protecting this point produces measurable effects on the entire energetic and physical system. When you feel the instinct to pull your collar up, to wrap a scarf around the back of your neck, to cover this point in certain environments or around certain people, that instinct is not irrational. It is Asian intelligence operating through your body, communicating a real energetic reality that your conscious mind may not have the framework to understand yet. Now, who is most vulnerable at the Alta Major? Not everyone experiences equal vulnerability at this point. The people for whom the Alta Major is most significant and most in need of conscious attention and protection tend to share specific characteristics. Highly sensitive individuals and empaths. The person whose energetic field is naturally more permeable, who feels other people's emotions as their own, who is significantly affected by the energy of spaces and environments, who struggles to maintain energetic boundaries in relationships. The permeability that makes them sensitive also makes the Alta Major more accessible to incoming energetic influences that are not their own. Now, spiritual practitioners and those who have opened their energy field through significant practice, like meditation, energy work, plant medicine, body work, breath work, you name it, all of these practices open the energetic field. Opening that is intentional and conscious is necessary for spiritual development. But an open field without adequate protection and grounding is a field that receives indiscriminately. And the Alta Major is, as the primary reception point, bears the burden of that indiscriminate reception. Healers and caregivers, the person who holds a space for others, who receives the energy of many people's pain, fear, and unprocessed emotion, accumulates that energy somewhere. And the Alta Major, as a primary reception point, is frequently where it accumulates. Healers who experience specific heaviness or tension at the base of the skull after sessions are experiencing exactly this. Those going through significant spiritual openings or acceleration, periods of accelerated spiritual development, whether through practice, through life crisis, through initiation of any kind, are periods of heightened Alta Major activity. The increased download of higher dimensional information and will through this point during these periods requires increased attention to its protection and integration. Now, there are certain environments that produce specific effects at the Alta Major for sensitive individuals, like hospitals and care facilities. The concentration of pain, fear, grief, and the energetic residue of illness in these spaces creates an environment of significant energetic density. The Alta Major, as a receptive point, can accumulate this density rapidly in these environments. Also, crowded urban spaces, particularly in enclosed spaces, creates an environment of significant energetic noise. For the sensitive individual, the Alta Major receives this noise, produce a specific fatigue and overwhelm that sensitive people report after time in crowded environments. As well, spaces with difficult history. Now, there's locations where significant trauma, violence, or suffering has occurred retain an energetic imprint of those events. The Alta Major's receptive function makes sensitive individuals particularly susceptible to keep picking up these imprints, experiencing them as inexplicable heaviness, sadness, or disorientation upon entering these spaces. Now, there's also relationships with people who drain energy. The person who consistently leaves you feeling depleted, not through any obvious behavior, but simply through the quality of their energetic field, often produces their effect specifically through the Alta Major. The back of the neck, as the primary reception point, receives the energetic quality of whoever you are in sustained proximity to. Now, let's be specific about protection, because protection is not fear. It is conscious stewardship of the most significant energetic opening in your physical structure. Physical covering. The instinct is correct, and the practice is valid. Wearing a scarf, a high collar, or any covering at the back of the neck is in environments or around people where you feel energetically vulnerable is not superstition. It is physical anchoring of energetic intention. The physical act of covering creates a psychosomatic signal of protection, and through the body-mind connection, that signal is real. So choose fabrics with protective energetic associations for your tradition, like silk for its insulatory properties, or wool for its grounding qualities. Stones and crystals at the Alta Major, like black tourmaline, obsidian, and shungite, the primary protective stones across most traditions, can be worn at the back of the neck, carried in clothing near this point, or placed at the occiput during meditation or rest. These stones are understood across traditions to create protective energetic field that shields the reception point without closing it, filtering what comes in rather than blocking all input. Visualization and intention. Visualizing a protective structure at the Alta Major. Not to forget, grounding after exposure. After time, in energetically challenging environments, the deliberate practice of grounding, like barefoot on earth, deliberate physical presence, breathwork, cold water on the back of the neck, helps discharge what has been accumulated at the Alta Major and reestablishes the integrity of the energetic boundary at this point. Regular clearing of the Alta Major in energy work is essential. For those who work with energy practitioners, like Reiki practitioners, therapists, shamanic healers, specifically requesting attention to the base of the skull is valuable and often produces significant shifts. The clearing of accumulated energy at this point is one of the most immediately noticeable interventions in skilled energy work. Now, protection is one side of the Alta Major equation. The other side is the conscious, intentional activation and development of the center as a spiritual tool. Because the Alta Major is not only a point of vulnerability, it is a point of extraordinary potential. A center that, when developed and protected with a skill, becomes the primary channel through which the individual begins to receive and express the higher will, which is the soul's purpose, the divine organizing intelligence, the specific mission the incarnated self came here to fulfill. Bailey's work describes a specific energetic triangle: crown chakra, ajna center at the third eye, and the Alta Major, that, when all three are developed and functioning, creates the complete circuit of spiritual consciousness in the physical body. The crown receives cosmic energy, the ajna center directs it with the higher mind, the Alta Major grounds it into the physical nervous system as will made incarnate. The triangle is incomplete with the Alta Major. Many spiritual traditions have focused extensively on crown and third eye activation and produced practitioners who are visionary and mentally developed, but who lack the grounding of that vision into purpose action. The Alta Major is the missing piece, the point that takes the spiritual vision received at the crown and directed by the third eye and downloads it into the physical vehicle as lived purpose. This is why Zeus Point name is so precise. Zeus, in the Greek understanding, is not just powerful. He is organizing. He is directive. He takes the chaos of potential and organizes it into ordered manifestation. This is precisely what the Alta Major does in the developed function. Now, the practice of deliberately working with the Alta Major in meditation involves a specific quality of attention that is different from how most people approach meditation. Rather than directing awareness upward, toward the crown, toward expanded states, toward the solution of the self, the Alta Major practice involves directing awareness backward and downward to the specific physical point at the base of the skull. This grounding of awareness into the physical location of the center is itself the activation practice. Attention is energy. Where you place sustained, conscious attention, energy follows and organizes. Pair this with breath. Drawing the inhale specifically to this point at the base of the skull, feeling the breath filling and expanding the cranial base, then exhaling with the intention of clearing and opening the center. This practice, done consistently, begins to stimulate the etheric activity of the Alta Major and gradually increases both its receptive capacity and its protective function. You can also use toning and sounds. And as always, and this is the consistent teaching of every tradition that has worked with this center, activation must be paired with integration. The more open the Alta Major becomes, the more important grounding, ethical clarity, and emotional stability become. Because what comes through is proportional to the opening. And an opening without the container to hold what comes through produces the distortions we discussed earlier. Now, the Alta Major is not a shortcut to spiritual power. It is the responsibility center of the spiritual path. The point where the higher will enters must be met with a vehicle that has done the work, the shadow work, the emotional work, the ethical refinement necessary to wield what comes through with integrity. The point at the base of your skull is not incidental anatomy. It is a gateway, recognized independently by Theosophists and Taoists, by Greek esoterists and Vedic practitioners, by indigenous healers and modern craniosacral therapists, as the most significant energetic junction in the human physical structure. The point where the highest meets the most fundamental, where cosmic intelligence lands in the spine, where divine will becomes a human action. Protect it, develop it, and work with it consciously. And the next time you feel the instinct to cover the back of your neck, to wrap a scarf around it, to pull your collar up, to shield it in a particular environment or around a particular person, honor that instinct. It is not anxiety. It is ancient intelligence speaking through your body about a point your ancestors knew mattered. If this episode is opening something in you and you're ready to go deeper into your energetic anatomy, your protection practices, and the soul level work of the Alchemical Pattern-to-Healing Framework, all the information is in the link in the description box below. Until next time.